The Utah football team has a difficult task trying to stop Bo Nix this Saturday. We're going to talk about how they have to do it and talk about Utah men and women's basketball, both of which programs are off to very hot starts on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. Appreciate all of you who have subscribed to the show. We're nearly at 600 subscribers. Love interacting with you guys in those YouTube comments, as well as on social media. You guys can follow the show at Locked On Utes, and you can follow me and interact with me at JT Wistersill on Twitter. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline, as you covered the season, more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. As I mentioned, my name is JT Wistersill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined for today's show by the former host of this podcast, Brian Brown. Always great having Brian on. But Brian, we do come into today's show with a little bit of a heavy heart. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Virginia football team, the coaches, the players, the families, all the fans. It's just these tragedies. It's something that's all too familiar for us, unfortunately, losing players. And once again, our thoughts especially go out to the families of these three players that were tragically killed.
Yeah, and you always want to do more and have more to say and be able to do something to help alleviate some of this, the tragic burden and the feelings and emotions. And there's really just not a whole lot to say other than just, we're heartbroken. And I thought it was very interesting that Kyle Whittingham even mentioned in his press conference that they'd reached out to offer support. And that's, really all you can do is try to be supportive and help people as they go through the grieving process. And you and I, like you mentioned, have both been through this on different sides of it. And it's just a tragedy. And, I wish there was more we could do right now.
Our hearts are broken. And once again, our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone with the Virginia football program. Now, never easy to shift off something like that, but we are going to go back into less serious stuff, into talking about the game itself, football. So Utah, they got a tough task this week trying to stop Bo Nix. Bo Nix has been incredible this season, which did not seem like it was going to be the case after his first week game against Georgia, where I believe he threw 3 interceptions in the first half, I want to say, or at least had it in the game. But since then, he's been awesome on the season. He has 2,775 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His QBR is at 89. I'm not the biggest QBR fan, but I'll say this. He's third in QBR. Anytime you have a high QBR, you're doing some things right still. So Bo has been on a tear. We know what he can do with his legs a little bit, but he's really been beating teams inside the pocket this year, making a number of really difficult and accurate throws. And Kyle Whittingham even said when asked, what's the biggest difference about this Oregon team from last year's? It's him. Look, Anthony Brown did a lot of nice things last year, but especially down the stretch really fell apart. And Bo Nix, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is who he is. He's proven time and again against these tough opponents. And yes, I know they had the tough loss this week against Washington, but look, Bo still had played pretty well, all things considered, was dealing with the injury, was also part of it. Still had 2 touchdowns in that one, 280 yards. So I expect Bo, even though he is a little injured, and we'll see what kind of version of him we see against Utah. He might not be 100%. I think he's going to go, and Utah has a tough task trying to stop him.
They do, and it's not just Bo Nix, right? It's Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator, who's done a phenomenal job coming in there. Very young, unique background. Didn't play college football at all. In fact, he I think midway through his senior season in high school got injured and was just like, all right, I'm good. I'm going to just be a coach now. And then joined up with the ASU coaching staff, and in a way he went. So unique guy for sure. And they do a lot of great things on offense. Now, the one benefit that he does have is that offensive line in front of him is amazing, phenomenal, wonderful, and whatever 3 or 4 syllable adjectives. I know I'm really stretching myself using those 4 syllable words, but JT has really opened me up to becoming a better broadcaster. So, but just along those lines, my mic decides to just turn down on me. I love it when it does that. It's one of those things where they've got an incredible, and then that stuff was all there before, right? They had a great offensive line. They didn't lose a ton of guys from that group, but Bo is Bo, and I think he's been as good or better than any quarterback in the Pac-12,
Yeah.
and that is the real surprise, right? Because the
Mhm.
guy that we saw that was sometimes Bo and sometimes no Nix was not that at Auburn, and I think it's a credit to Coach Dan Lanning, how good a coach he is, and credit to that Oregon staff, and obviously, a change of scenery can do everybody a lot of good. Auburn's a beautiful campus; it's a beautiful place, but Eugene does not suck either. So
Mhm. Well, and just in terms of program stability, I mean, what a mess the Auburn team was even last year. Actually, I mean, props to them. They just got a nice win this past week, but man, there's just a lot of things going on in that Auburn football program this year, and those have been transpiring for almost Bo Nix's entire tenure down there. And I'm someone, even when Bo Nix first burst onto the scene, I was a fan of him, even though you could tell there were those ups and downs and roller coasters. You didn't know what he was going to get. So I've
yeah.
enjoyed seeing him put it all together, and this will be the first time this season I'm really not rooting for him to have a good game.
Yeah, me as well, and I think it's a lot of that is going to be up to how well can he recover from whatever injury it was he was
Yeah.
suffering. At some point in time, the Pac-12 is going to have to do something about this. It's not just about media and reporting; it's about there are millions of dollars at stake here in terms of gambling and production value and everything like that, and it's not ever going to completely drive people away from the product. We've seen that people. Uh, are going to watch football almost regardless. But at some point in time, people are going to start finding it. An interesting thing, and this is a little bit of a sidebar. I apologize, JT, but when I was with the Alliance of American Football, our the head of the alliance, Charlie Ebersol, said our greatest competition is not the NFL. Our greatest competition is Disney Plus. It's Marvel. It's your time. It's your attention.
Mhm.
And then eventually people are going to stop tuning in if things like Pac-12 refs and injury reports and all this stuff that just causes frustration that makes being a fan harder.
Yeah.
People are just they're going to let go. And I like that. It's a apologize for diverging on that one, but it's just
That's true.
it's part of this matchup, right? Because
Mhm.
we know Cam Rising's injured, we know Dalton Kincaid is injured, we know Paul Miley's injured, we know Johnny Mae is injured. Whittingham was very coy. Well, we think one of them might play. Whatever, Kyle. Like, do I know some injuries? Perhaps. I mean, but I'm not going to talk about him on here. I get people get upset at me if I talk about like what they have for lunch sometimes up at the facility. So I'll definitely stay away from talking about injuries, and that kind of lack of transparency is going to be a really big issue, especially as NIL starts to move forward. And some of these players, I know I believe it's the one rule that the NCAA decided to enforce was no gambling stuff, but somehow, some way, that money's going to get into it, and when it
Yeah.
does, it's just going to cause an issue. So. It's a unique factor in breaking down this game, talking about it. I mean, I've rambled about it. I'm curious what your thoughts are about this whole situation and how much the injuries play into it.
Yeah, it is a difficult thing. First of all, I do want to say, Brian, blink twice if it was a sub sandwich that they had for lunch. Okay, there we
No.
go. See? Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's
I should talk about I know what they do on Mondays for victory dinners and listen, they eat good.
you good? Yeah.
Chomp chomp.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's the insider information we wanted right there is the victory dinner Mondays. We love to get the extra stuff on Locked On Utes. And yeah, speaking of what you talked about with the injuries for this team, it's always look, we as the media, we always want to know what's going on there. But I do feel pretty good about the state of this offensive line right now. And it's a little bit of a concern going into the Oregon game because look, that's Oregon there. Look, I know they just lost a tough game to Washington. I still feel like that's one of the 15 best teams in the country. So this is going to be a tough game going up there. You want to be at full strength, but whoever's out there at center, I do feel like this Utah offensive line can hold up. And look, they've never really had a bad performance where Cam's gotten sacked over 3 times, and I don't expect that to change. Could he get sacked twice? Very well could. It's a really good defensive line still, but I still think this Utah offensive line will be able to hold up. And the biggest thing will be, can they pave those lanes in the running game? And I do expect the Utah running game to have a decent game.
I do too, and I think a lot of that is the return of Tavion Thomas, who, again, we didn't know the status of him going into
Yeah.
this. We heard some things about, maybe he was nicked up a little bit as well, and just, et cetera, right? I'm going to get off of that because nobody wants to hear me talk about that. In fact, with as raspy as my voice is right now, I don't know that anybody really wants to hear me talk, period, but deal with it, y'all. It's they're going to have to run the football against Oregon, right? They have to wear down
Yep.
that defensive front. And, I thought Coley Fayu played really well, but again, Paul Miley stepped into their role as center against Stanford last year and played really well.
Yes.
There's not a lot of variation up front on Stanford's defensive line. I didn't see a lot from the nose tackle that had me thinking like, oh my goodness, Coley Fayu is going to be like the greatest center in the history of centers.
Yeah.
He did a great job, and he was prepared. And really, like Coach Whittingham said in the press conference, credit goes to Jim Harding on that one for having
Yes.
his guys up and ready. And
Mhm.
I mentioned it in a tweet on Saturday. Like, there were times where people would be up in arms screaming during the game that we had our third string center in, and I think it was 2 or 3 drives before anybody even noticed.
Yeah.
And some people didn't notice till the end of the game, which is just a credit to Jim Harding. He's a phenomenal offensive coach, phenomenal offensive line coach. He had like, I believe it was 6 or 7 player retirements due to injury
Yeah.
in the early years at the University of Utah, and that was one of those things that I'd harped on a lot and people kind of pushed back on. Well, look, they haven't had one in years now, knock on wood, and it's benefited them greatly to allow guys like Michael Mogafisi to develop at his own pace, Satao Laumea to develop. We're seeing Jaron Kump is getting an opportunity to develop in spot duty and after all the injuries sustainment, right, and everything like that. Falcon Kamatule getting a little more and more reps, right. You can see that they're trying to get him ready to go,
Yeah.
and so I'm going to step off my soapbox a little bit because I think we probably should just break down Oregon, but yeah, the run game is going to be critical. And, I think I don't want to say it in a negative way, but Cam is not Michael Penix Jr. and Cam
Mhm.
doesn't have McMillan and Roma Dunze out there catching balls. He's got some tremendous tight ends and Dalton Kincaid, Thomas Yasmin coming into his own. Devon Bailey is great, but it's just, they're going to need the run game, and especially against this Oregon team where offensively they're going to score.
Mhm. No, you're right. We don't have those guys who are just gonna go for 600 yards of offense, like you said, some of those games like that. It's going to be a grounded out on the ground kind of game. And, through the air, you can make plays, but it's just consistently over and over again, especially with the fact that, as you mentioned, Cam Dalton, those guys are hurt. So you're not going to be able to ask them to go and do that. So it's a fun test for them again on Saturday. And we're going to get into how the Utah defense is going to go about containing Bo Nix, who is having that strong year, in a second. But first, I want to talk to you guys about SimpliSafe. If you ever thought about securing your home with home security, but you have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up right now, Locked On Utes listeners. You can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is the biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Guys, SimpliSafe is always going to have your back. It has an emergency 24/7 professional monitoring agents that use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real, so you can so that Priority Police can get a quick response and help you guys out. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. So it's once again the top rated SimpliSafe app. It's easy to install and use, and it'll be there to help you guys out. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/URL today. This is the biggest discount of the year, so you don't want to wait. That's simplisafe.com/LockedOnCollege. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Guys, UCCCU is offering a 15th-month savings certificate with an incredibly high APY of 4.00%. Plus, you can jump up to an even higher rate of return anytime during the life of your certificate. Once again, it's a 15-month savings certificate with an incredibly high APY of 4.00%. Once again, UCCU is going to be there to help you guys out. We know that inflation and interest rates are on the rise, and that's why UCCCU is here to help. It's an incredible opportunity for people who want to build up their savings. Plus, opening a UCCU savings account certificate is super easy. You can do it online, over the phone, or just stop by any UCCU branch. But remember, this offer is only for a limited time. So if you have a savings that you are just sitting in a standard savings account, get a UCCU savings certificate. That way, your savings can start working harder and earn more. Visit uccu.com to learn more or get a savings certificate today. Make sure you guys head over. Once again, a 15th-month savings certificate with incredibly high APY of 4.00%, only for limited time, and it has a variety of terms and options to match your specific needs. UCCU, love where you bank. So, Brian, jumping back in, talking about this Utah football defense and how they need to go about trying to get a stop against Bo Nix and this offense. Look, Bo's a guy who can beat you with his legs too. So I think it is important to keep him in the pocket, but you can't give him all day to throw in the pocket because he's just one of those quarterbacks. I think Utah's got to get home with 4 in this game. And I think they're coming off their offensive line, building up that confidence. I asked Jonah Ellis after the game, what's changed for him? And he said confidence. You could see him breaking out the spin move, and what a gorgeous move that was, getting home. Sabote Peppa, we know how he's improved. Aliki Vaimahi and Gabe Reed, the veteran. I think one of those guys is going to have a monster game, and especially getting that interior rush, I think would really be key. So I think you really got to keep Bo in the pocket while dropping him. He can't have 5 seconds to throw, because if he does, the receivers are going to get open downfield, and Bo's going to be able to hit him. So Utah's got to get home with 4, bring a couple of exotic blitzes, but I do think more times than not, I like dropping guys in coverage, and you need to bring 5 or 6 on third down. I understand, but second and long every time, I don't want to be bringing 6 guys. I do want to be able to get home with 4 a little bit in this game. And I think the Utes are going to be able to do that sometimes.
Yeah, they're going to have as good an opportunity as anybody, I think, in the conference because of the way the defensive line is playing right now. I think the unique thing is going to be where your pressure comes from, right? I think one aspect that's really changed a lot is with the loss of Van Fillinger, we're seeing a lot more Mo Diabate in the pressure game, and that's leading to a lot of sacks because he's manipulating the pocket, and I think that's the risk with Bo. If you get him outside of the pocket and let him operate, he's phenomenal, right? Like, really good on the run, throws a great ball, all that kind of stuff. And he's got great wide receivers, especially Troy Franklin, who one of the top. I mean, again, this conference is ridiculous when it comes to wide receiver talent. Like there were years where Devon Vele would be the best wide receiver, behind whoever USC had in first. And
good point.
now there's like 50 of them. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Arizona's bringing 2 to the table. That's how crazy things are. But I digress. It's so much about it is manipulating the pocket, forcing him into the Samote Pepas, the Aliki Vimahis. We've seen Junior Chafuna be a little limited in his pass rush. I'm not sure if maybe he's a little nicked up there, or if it's just by design because he's so much better at keeping that pocket, and forcing things. But it's one of those things where you're gonna rely on Clark Phillips coverage. You're gonna rely on a lot of that secondary stuff. You're gonna try and give. I have to believe that Utah's gonna try and disguise their coverages a little bit, give them some different looks. But then again, I've said that in the past, and they've shown me like, nope, we just think we can beat them 1-on-1. So if that's the case, like, good luck to Utah on that one. I think that you got to do everything you can. And Whittingham said as much in the press conference, right? He's like, backs against the wall. You have to keep fighting. And this is a team and a defense that's really picked up the challenge in the last few weeks. And you mentioned Jonah Ellis. My buddies and I, we call him the loiterer.
Yeah.
Just because he's always just around loitering in the backfield, causing problems. He's like that little brother when you go to the convenience store that is picking up everything and like, can I get this? Can I get this? Can I get this? And he just pesters. But it's phenomenal to watch. And I think the combo of he and Mo is just really exciting for Utah and something I kind of have harped on all year. So, but we can talk about why it is that they took so much time to do that, and there's so much that I don't know too, as much as we do get inside information. But it is really going to be up to this defensive line to try and rush him into bad decisions, because I think that's a lot of what Georgia did. And I think it's one way or another, right? Either you try and rush him by speeding him up, or you try to drop as much into coverage and confuse him and make him make throws. That's a risky endeavor against a guy like Troy Franklin, in my humble opinion.
I totally agree. It's a tough task, and it's going to be exciting to see how they can go about and do it on both sides of the ball. It's going to be a great battle in the trenches, and Isaac Asiata is going to join us on tomorrow's show to talk more about that too. So it's going to be just a fun week breaking down this game on the show. And we're actually going to close with something on this game in a second. But first, we talk about the men's basketball team. I do want to give a special shout out to the women's basketball team. Just looking at what they've done so far, they won 88-63 against Idaho, then 97-27 against Utah Valley, and then against Southeastern Louisiana, they won 99-62, in which they forced a program record 32 steals. Coach Lynne Roberts, what she's done with this team has been really impressive and a lot of fun to watch. We know the run they went on last year in the Pac-12, even won some games in the NCAA tournament. They actually played the last ever game played in Texas's old stadium because they tore it down and put a new one up. And if you guys haven't looked up a picture of what Texas's new basketball arena looks like, I would highly recommend it. But focusing on this Utah Women's program, just all the credit to Lynne Roberts and her team, and they have done a great job. And I'm excited to see what they're going to be able to do as number 16 ranked Oklahoma comes in to the Huntsman on Wednesday night. So make sure you guys head out and support the team in that one. But Brian, this team's been fun to watch.
Yeah, it has, and not surprisingly, I think this was a team that was going to take some big steps for Coach Greg Smith, and I was lucky enough to work with him when I was working at 1280, and he was the head coach at Utah State. So I knew when they made the hire that he was going to start to make some strides, and I think you're seeing that first and foremost with recruiting. I talked about Will Exacti and how great I thought he was going to be. Keba Keita is uh, uh, like a model. He looks like
Yes.
a Greek god that just walked out of a statue and just turned into a Hulk of a basketball player. But also Brandon Carlson. We knew that if he just stayed healthy, he was going to be a
Yeah.
dominant force. But what's been nice is the addition of Gabe Madsen to his side and providing a little bit of scoring through that. And I'm a big fan of Mike Saunders Jr. as well. Like those were big additions, both from within the program and from outside of it.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the men's team's been doing a great job too. It's fun to see what the women's team has done this year. Utah basketball finally starting to get back in there. Players for the women's team like Jenna Johnson as well. Gianna Neepkins really doing a good job keeping them on this strong path that has them ranked as a 25th team. So it's going to be fun once again this Wednesday against Oklahoma. Make sure you guys head out there to show your support. And by the time this airs, Utah will have played against Idaho State. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Utah men's team in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline, as you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's your number one source for sports betting info this season with stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball, soccer, esports is all there. Guys, the World Cup is coming up very soon. NBA, college basketball, NFL, college football, it's all underway, and it's all there for you to bet on at BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And sticking with BetOnline for a moment, Brian, the line in this game at the moment is Oregon favored by 3. How do you feel about that right here?
Standard home line, right? So that's means that they're basically calling it a pick 'em. It'll be interesting to see if that line moves towards the end of the week as we get more clarity on injury situations with Bo Nix and et cetera. But I think on the road, Utah's got as good a chance as anybody to go up to Eugene and snatch a victory.
I feel
That
the
would be
same.
really something too.
It would be.
2 losses in a row at home for Oregon.
That would be something crazy to see after how strong of a year Dan Lanning has been having. But this is a really good Utah team, as we know. It's going to be fun to talk about it all week long and see if they are able to get the win. But before we finish up with something on that football game, do you want to talk about this Utah team? You mentioned your guy, Will Exact, getting it done. I'm going to shout out Gabe Madsen. You look at his last game he had versus Cal State, Bakersfield, 8 of 14 from the field, 6 of 9 from 3. We know he's a sniper, 3 of 5 from the free throw line, but had 3 steals in this game, also had a block and 25 points. We've really just seen the evolution of his game. And he is more than a guy who's a spot up shooter. I know he's been working really hard in the offseason to make those strides in his game, and it's exciting to see it play out. And I think he's going to be a big part of this Utah offense this season. Also, we know what Brandon Carlson's been doing, had 12 points in this one. He's been a monster for the Utes and very well could be their best player this season. I think him, Marco Anthony will be right there neck and neck for it. But also want to give a shout out to Ben Carlson, 5 of 8 from the field. Made his 3, 13 points, and led this team in rebounding. The Wisconsin transfer is a guy that I think is going to be a big addition for this Utes, especially when they get into conference play. Having a guy come in who brings that extra size and physicality, can do some things on offense and defense. And as we talked about, Brian, I think this Utah team's going to have a chance to surprise some people this year.
Oh, without a doubt. And I mean, there are guys that we haven't even talked about that really haven't shown out. Lazar Stefanovic is a guy that I think is really going to surprise some people. And look, it's great when you have something that you can go to like Brandon Carlson that can be the catalyst or the beginning for your offense, and then you can build off of that. But what I think, more than anything, Gabe Madsen has provided is a secondary scorer, and creator, and that's really huge for Utah. I don't know that they necessarily had that last year. A lot of their
Yeah.
buckets were more system design and everything like that. And you can see it, Riley Wooster's been able to be a lot more of a facilitator
Yep.
and take that role a lot more. It's not forcing him out of his comfort zone. You know, I
Yeah.
said last year he was kind of the engine of this offense and how he went, the team would go, and that's the nice thing that you don't have to depend on him. You know, and there's a lot of depth to this roster too. It just a lot of it will depend on confidence. You know, guys, as the season wears on, and especially Will's a guy that I looked at to see like is he going to be that guy that you know tapers off as the season goes on with such a strong start. You know, same with Gabe Madsen. What are things going to be like for him? You know, with once he gets into season play, is he going to be able to stay consistent? So, and Ben Carlson as well. I think he's a guy that's going to have a flip side to it, right? We've seen good
Yeah.
things so far. His ceiling will just expand.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way, and it's exciting to watch and see how this men's team progresses. And by the time you hear this, I assume Utah will have had another strong win versus Idaho, and it'll be interesting to see who the breakout player kind of is. I like Mike Saunders to respond. He didn't make a shot in the previous game. He's the guy I'm excited about. I still think he will finish the season as the starting point guard for this Utah team. But look, give credit where it's due. Raleigh Wooster holding it down and doing a good job running Craig Smith's system.
Yeah,
And
and I think just real quick on Mike Saunders, like he struggled from the field, right? But he was very productive within the offense, good passer, all that kind of stuff. And this is uh, you're not going to see a contention for the Pac-12 crown, but you're going to
yes.
see some really good basketball from this unit.
Yep. And I'll have people a lot more excited, I think, about this direction of Utah basketball as compared to how the season ended last year.
Yeah. Plus, they play a really fun brand of basketball. Like
True.
it's up tempo. They move the ball.
Yeah.
It's not like most college basketball where you're sitting watching one dude dribble around or pass around the perimeter for 25 seconds, and in the last 5 seconds somebody chucks something up.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think it's going to be fun to see what this team can do this season. As soon as a couple weeks away, by the way, we're not far off from December 1st, which is when Utah is going to be taking on Arizona. So that'll be a good test for this team. And look, are they going to win that? Probably not. But hey, play them competitively. And I think you'll have a lot of teams in the Pac 12 going, okay, see what Utah's starting to do, which I think is really cool. And going back to Utah football, Brian, to close this one out, Oregon game Saturday. It's one of the biggest ones of the season. How do you see it playing out?
Oh, it's it. I think people have hyper focused on the slow starts, right? And I think that's twofold, right? I think one is that this is just a tired football team, tired, beat up, and injured, and against a team like Stanford going into the season, you want to play well on senior night, but also like football is hard,
It's hard.
and we saw that like in some of the comments from Matt LaFleur, Derek Carr
Derek
from the
Carr,
NFL.
man. Yeah.
Like they're nailing it on the head. This is a really hard sport. It's really physical. By the time game 11, game 12 comes around, like you are dragging, and it's just there's not a whole lot you can do to fight through it. And I know that it's easy for all of us to sit in our chairs and talk about how they need to do this, they need to do
Armchair
that, everything else.
quarterbacks. Mhm.
Yeah, man. Like you and I both been in the trenches, literally and figuratively. We've watched these teams from afar and up close, and I've been around enough teams to know, like that middle to end stretch of the season, it's just all about toughness and grit.
Yeah.
And I think you've seen Utah really grit through it. Now, this is as big a game as Utah's had all year.
Yeah.
We've seen them be great at getting up for big games. I feel like they'll have something up the sleeve. I feel like this is a team and a group that really wants to finish the season strong. And the focus is there, and they're going to pull out all the stops against Oregon. So, if Utah gets off to a hot start, I like that because I think it brings back some real like ness on the Oregon sideline, just confidence issues because
Yeah.
that's really where they're at right now. They just lost the game. And so you kind of want to stick it to them early. Now, on the flip side, Oregon's going to want to come out and just really establish dominance and all that other stuff because they're coming off a loss. So it's a unique game.
Who are you picking?
Man. I mean, privately, I've told people I think this is going to be a really tough one for Utah to win.
Yeah.
And I don't really have a problem saying that on the podcast. It's obvious.
It's a 100%.
But there's just something about this team, this program, and this minute right now where they're at. I just have a hard time picking against them on this game.
Mhm.
Like it's just they've got 2 games.
Yep.
And for a team and a group that's been through so much over the past 2 or 3 years, you can do it for 2 games.
Exactly. Feel the same way, and it's going to be exciting to see how it all plays out on Saturday. But Brian, for people who have a little bit of a football fix, they can tune in somewhere Friday, can't they? Feel that a little bit.
Yeah, part of the reason that I sound like I've been smoking heaters outside the the Golden Nugget out in Wendover is because I was out in the cold and having a blast with Dusty Lister and Dane Stewart extremely well. Jeff Hansen, Utah fans more than likely know Jeff, who is just, I think Jeff Hansen might be the most favorite BYU fanfluencer / media personality amongst
Such a
Utah
good guy.
fans. He is. We had a blast doing high school playoffs on Thursday and Friday. We'll be back at it for the finals. Big games, Corner Canyon against Skyridge. Multiple potential Utah recruits on both of those teams. You're going to want to watch Cash Dillon for Corner Canyon. He's a junior, 2024. Has a Utah offer. Utah loves him. He's a heck of a football
Beast.
player. Also, we talked about Isaac Wilson last week. I know you talked about it with Josh Furlong. The more I watch Isaac's film, the more I think to myself, like, there are a lot of similarities between he and, I'm going to hate saying this, but Cam Rising.
Ooh, I like it.
There's just body type. Isaac's a little bit better in the pocket, a little bit more accurate right now at the high school level, even if he did throw 4 interceptions, whatever. It is what it is. But and then on the Skyridge side of things, Laia Kalama, both of us love him. He's a junior, 2024 kid. I would look for him to get a Utah offer at some point in time, although I don't have any, inside information on that for sure. Smith Snowden, Utah desperately wants him. Yep. And then, Tausili Okana, there is whispers that Utah is still in the fight for that one. We'll see. He's definitely hunting for big game out there. And then in the 5A game, it's Lehigh and Timpview. And I'm gonna say it one more time, JT.
All right.
Offer Micah Beckstead. Somebody out there needs to get an offer out to Micah
I
Beckstead.
thought for sure you were going to bring up Caden Sweat or Brousseau, which are also very good.
All three, man. Like these are dudes. And
I'm a huge Beckstead fan though, so I'm totally
yeah.
They also have, I'm not going to try to say his name because I'm not going to be able. Spencer Fano also used to in the running. Their left tackle is only a sophomore, and if I try to say his name right now, I'm going to look like an idiot. So I'm just going to say Utah offer that guy.
Yeah, well, and he'll get an offer here soon if he doesn't already. Utah's going to be a little bit slower to get offers out to some of those juniors and sophomores, but you'll definitely see that one coming.
It's going to be a fun Friday. Also going to be a great Saturday morning. Want to shout out College Game Day for officially going to the Brawl of the Wild up in Montana. Montana State hosting Montana. It's a great rivalry. Make sure you guys tune in to College Game Day. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere, and all the credit in the world to the committee for deciding to go up there. Also want to say thank you guys for making Locked On Utes your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Brian, always great having you on. Appreciate you joining us.
Alai Kalaniuvalu.
Oh, there we go.
Had to give my guy a shout out.
He's a beast.
Even if the mic did cut out on me.
Yeah, even Mike hasn't been agreeing with you much today. You've been fighting through it. I appreciate you. We're
going to throw him in the tank for a little bit and let him sit and think about what he's been doing today.
Well, Brian, always great having you on the show. Appreciate you coming on. And thank you guys again for making Locked On Utes your first listen every day. And we'll be back tomorrow.